And hybrid is actually another controversy in itself, because there's a lot of people out there on both sides that think hybrid's actually one of the worst options.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking, right?
Yeah.
It's like why do people think it's one of the worst options? Why is it potentially detrimental to be hybrid?
Welcome to today's episode of Unmuted. What we're talking about today is remote work. All the controversy around it, all the good, the bad, and kind of just talking through what people think about remote work, what we think about remote work, how we were able to create this company during the middle of COVID when essentially remote work was all that we could do. And I have some experience, in my job prior to coming in here doing this full time. I worked at a company that was known for one of being
one of the largest remote work
the OGs of being an all remote company from kind of almost from the get go, not in the very beginning. In the very beginning, they had an office in San Francisco, but they quickly moved to being an all remote company, and then they established a culture around that, and it flourished, even going through IPO. Even when there was doubts of, how can a company go through IPO if they're all remote? There's no headquarters, which the headquarter was the CEO's condo in San Francisco. that was HQ. So that's what we're talking about today, and the impact that remote work has had on the world, and kind of how that got accelerated during COVID. Being at this company that I was at prior, I was GitLab, and we were already down the road of remote work. And then when COVID happened and the pandemic happened, it became almost the norm at that time.
It became the blueprint, pretty much, of how to do it, right? And so on how a company takes, something like, especially in the technology space, how you take a company in that space and make it remote. It's not easy.
No.
It's, a lot of other companies had challenges with it, but because you guys embraced that culture from day one, I feel like they had a leg up, anyways, right?
Yeah, I think so. And uncovering what's underneath that is a stack of tools is very important in terms of remote work. The different ability to have video conferencing, your chat, so whether it's Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, Slack's important, G Suite or Microsoft Outlook. Parm and I have had debates on Microsoft versus Google, and when I was at GitLab, it was something that I was anti-Microsoft because they were our competitor.
I actually think back. I don't think me and you had those debates.
Maybe it wasn't me.
It was more you and Scott.
True. So I was anti-Microsoft just because they were our biggest competitor at GitLab with GitHub, and that's just something that we I was don't give them anything even though it's Microsoft, and they're everywhere no matter what you do. So we chose G Suite, but the stack of tools is important. At GitLab, it was unique towards us because we had GitLab, the actual tool, which everybody at the company had to know how to use, and it was a collaboration tool as well with all the things that were being worked on with the software. So there's a unique aspect to being an all-remote company at GitLab because we had a tool that we could utilize as well. That was our own tool, and it was a brilliant way to make everyone understand at the company, from legal or IT, legal, HR, people ops, all these people that never really get that much exposure to anything technical in a tool. They had to do that, and that was a huge part of the remote work tool stack, in addition to all the common things that everybody else is used to. We talked about
video conferencing tools and
all those things. So that was a unique experience, but it did open up the eyes into what possibilities there are with remote work prior to the pandemic, and seeing a company run efficiently and people really being a lot happier just being able to work from wherever they are in the world. And GitLab had a unique way to address how they compensated people for that, and that's a whole nother thing that you can go Google that and what GitLab did with that and the controversy around that and how they worked through it. But it still allowed people to be where they want to be, less time on the road, driving in and out, and be around their friends and family and have access to that, and just be able to have a work-life balance that allowed them to spend that time on work and then easily just transfer over to family time or friend time and whatnot.
So I know you know a lot about remote work, and so I'm going to ask you another question right off the bat, even though you just got done talking.
Yeah, I kind of ran it there, but a lot to unfold.
Well, the reason I'm asking this question is because it's something that comes up a lot, right? So I worked in HR for the longest amount of time, and what ends up happening is management leaders right throughout organizations make the argument that remote work or 100% remote isn't it. It's
right.
not what they want. They want people to be in the office, right? But can you talk about why GitLab made that choice on being 100% remote? Because there's some, obvious drawbacks to being 100% remote, but there's a lot of obvious wins as well, and a lot of things that may not be so obvious. And so the prevailing culture goes back and says, hey, if you're 100% remote, we're not going to get the degree of supervision. You're not going to get those random collisions. You're not going to get, a flow of ideas. All these arguments get thrown out there. And so what companies end up doing is they go to some type of hybrid approach, right? Where, 2 days in the office, 3 days remote, or 3 days in the office, 2 days remote, or whatever. Can you kind of talk about why those approaches themselves also have drawbacks? Because people feel like that's like a compromise, but sometimes compromises aren't the best solution, right?
Right, and I think, like you said, the top 3 approaches, maybe the only 3 approaches to work is all remote, hybrid, or everybody in the office or on site.
Yeah.
Those are your top 3. That's how top 3. It's easy to be top 3 when there's only 3.
Yeah.
So perfect.
Yeah.
But and hybrid is actually another controversy in itself, because there's a lot of people out there on both sides that think hybrid's actually one of the worst options.
Yeah, and that's what I'm asking, right?
Yeah.
It's like why do people think it's one of the worst options? Why is it potentially detrimental to be hybrid? And whatever your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so the all-in type of approach to all remote is that everybody's all in, and so you have to adapt to that culture, and you have to learn how to make up for the things that you talked about that some people consider like the water cooler, running into the water cooler, and the random collaborations, or getting to brainstorm inside of a meeting room with everybody on site. You have to develop processes that allow you to do that virtually. And so that may be, having a group. We'd have a group call, so each division would come on and they would present what they've been working on, what they've been doing, and that allowed everybody in the company to have an opportunity to vocalize any kind of questions they might have, any kind of, hey, I'd like to know about this, and it familiarize people with the leaders of those groups, and even some of the people that are just the ICs, individual contributors that are part of that as well. And so what that did is it gave everybody visibility into the different areas. Now, throughout that process, and I came into GitLab, with around like 300 people, and I think it's up to about 2,000 people now. And a lot of things changed during then. There's things that made more sense as a smaller company that was easier to do with everybody on board. I think at one point the whole company got on a call, and it was
like a giant Zoom call or something.
Like a giant Zoom call. The whole company, you had 300, 400, 500 people, and it was easier to communicate.
Were they all unmuted?
They weren't. Yeah. Some. I've had my fair share of listening to people be unmuted and just doing whatever they're doing there, and getting called out by the CEO and saying, hey, which has got to be one of the most embarrassing things to happen to you. But yeah,
so when we talk about hybrid work, right, and I feel the same way. And one of the reasons I think hybrid work is just an absolute disaster is because it creates competition amongst employees, right? So you have employees, and you have like a spectrum of people. I think allowing people to work however they want is obviously ideal.
Right.
But what ends up happening is you have folks who are in the office, are mandated to be in the office. You have other employees or other teams within the same organization who have more flexibility. They're mandated to, not be in the office, or they're mandated to do whatever they want and have that flexibility. And it creates kind of tension within companies as well. And so then you have people who are, showing up to work every day in that commute. They log in and on their computer, and they see someone else who's working from home, and they want the same thing. And so I feel like that kind of, dichotomy, or that difference in management is a lot of times, right? That inconsistency from management as well can create problems, because when you have large organizations or even small organizations, everyone's going to treat different people differently, and some people are going to be more lenient, some people are going to be more stern about it. And so I feel like you're creating another opportunity for issues to occur. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's just how it feels looking from the outside in now.
I think it's true in a lot of different ways. I think, from the perspective that you talked about there, where it's creating, I'm going to the office, this person's working at home, and I have to make that commute, and we're both doing the same work. Why do they get that advantage over myself? And, is there a way to approach this with my manager? Or am I expected, was that the agreement that I made when I got hired, is that I would be in the office? And that was just part of their negotiation, was that they got to work remotely. But then I could agree upon that. Like that's going to cause a little bit of imbalance in like how I feel about. All right, well, I can spend an extra.
I have the same job.
Yeah, I have the same job, and I would love to be at home for an hour or two more, taken away from that commute. I could work that time frame, and then I can have that time with my family. And then I think on the interpersonal side as well, it makes it difficult, because even prior to all remote becoming a thing or the pandemic happening, there's a lot of companies out there, a lot of large companies, enterprise companies, where you have teams that may be centralized, like in Silicon Valley. Myself, I was down there in the South Bay. A large majority of our team was down there, but we still had people, part of our team, that were remote. And I never did feel like I had as much of a great relationship with them as I did the people on site, because we go to lunch.
Yeah,
and
you break bread together.
Yeah, and you do that. And I think that's where it's important when you're looking at the being all remote, is that those team functions now are held as a virtual meeting, and so everybody's on it and everyone's on the same playing field. So you
everyone's participating in the same way.
You are, and then you want to create relationships.
Yeah.
You're more apt to do that, because you're not just at an office where you're like, 75% of the team is here, and I'm developing these interpersonal relationships because they're around. Yeah. I'm not going to make as much effort to go with the other 25% that are remote, just because it's the easy thing to do. Now, when all remote, we have to do it because we're taking these calls. And there's other things and that we'll point to GitLab that they did to help incentivize you to even see people in person. If you were to travel to, let's say, if I was to go visit my brother-in-law in Nashville, and I flew out there, and there was 4 GitLab employees that worked there.
Yeah.
And I met and had a work day with them. GitLab would cover $150 per person that I met with.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Up to the max amount of what your plane ticket was. They wouldn't do accommodations. So $450 ticket. I met with 3 people. Each of them is $150 each. They covered that because it incentivized you to go see people in person. And normally outside.
Do they get the $150 as well?
They don't as well. No. If you're local, you don't get it. You might get a free lunch, because if there was 4 or more, you got to expense that trip.
Yeah.
But it also incentivized you just to meet people that even aren't just
That's brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, your marketing group.
Yeah.
And I think eventually that went away. COVID kind of took that away. And the last part that was unique to an all-remote company, there's a lot of unique things to it, but they had a conference where, I don't want to call it a conference, because the whole company got together in one location once a year.
And that location varied throughout the world.
Yeah, and it started off as really awesome places when the company's smaller. Like they were going to I think Cancun, South Africa, and these places that were not expensive for 200 people.
Sure.
And then
as it got larger, it got
larger. Like my first year, I got to go to New Orleans, which is still fun. And even being there 4.5 years, I only got to do one of these because shortly after that, COVID came about.
Sure.
And that just wasn't a possibility anymore. I think they had talked about Prague and the Bahamas, but then it just got canceled eventually by COVID. But that brought everyone together, and it was less about the business. And there's a couple of things, like some fun classes you could go to and learn some things, but it was more about the camaraderie, getting everyone together in person. And the running joke would be like, how tall is somebody? Because you're used to seeing on Zoom, this half the person, and it's always like, oh, you're tall, you're not, or shorter, and
so you won that contest, right?
I did.
Yeah,
I did on that. But I think at the time the CEO was actually taller than me, so he set the
bar.
He set the bar. But I could have been on the starting 5 for the basketball team if we ever created one.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So when it comes down to it, right? I think there's, going back to the 3 approaches: hybrid, remote only, and then in the office.
Mm-hmm.
With remote only or hybrid, we always hear that pushback from managers, right? So I know you were manager at GitLab as well. So how did you guys work through that? Because I feel like managers in a lot of organizations, they default to what we call, walking by or managing by walking, right?
Right.
They walk around, they look and see what people are up to, and they kind of make determinations. How did you guys deal with that? How did you guys manage in all remote environment? Because here we're a startup, we have our own kind of processes here, but I want to learn more about what you guys did in a larger company to see if there was anything that we can take away from that, or if there's any insights that the audience might like as well.
Yeah, I think that's where the interpersonal skills as a manager comes into play. I had great conversations with one of my directs over the last couple of years, William,
Mm-hmm.
who we talked about different styles of people from different countries, different cultures, and how they approach things. And
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's extremely important for an all remote company to have that interpersonal skill to not just be all business
Mm-hmm.
and you show up like, what have you done for me? But
Mm-hmm.
because you're all remote, you need to build a team environment where it feels like, okay, like we're a team,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't necessarily everyone has to be best friends.
Sure, yeah.
But you want to feel like people care.
Not like us. Yeah.
Not like us, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just show up and I'm
Yeah.
gonna get out of here as soon as this is over. But you want to build a team environment where you feel like that people are able to share, that it's like, hey, like
Mm-hmm.
this is what I did on my weekend.
Sure.
You don't have to share that, but it's like, hey, this is what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the work aspect, and
Mm-hmm.
focusing on that as well. So what I did, and I had a team that was dispersed across the world. So I had someone in Israel, I had someone in Prague, I had some East Coast
Mm-hmm.
and Central United States, and I did my best as a manager, especially being West Coast. We're waking up after everybody else has been working for the day, and a lot of people.
That's the best.
Yeah, a lot of people in EMEA. And EMEA really is that they're Europe over there, is that they're taking meetings a lot during like their dinner time and everything, because that's the norm. And so I made sure that my meetings, and I got up bright and early in the morning just so that they can have their evenings, because I want them to be able to cut off and balance.
You're taking that into account, yeah.
You're taking that into account. But so the important part is like having weekly team meetings where we're getting together, and it's talking about everything that's going on in the business world, but at the same time it allows everyone to just talk to each other, be more aware of what each of other's working on, and just talk as a team. In addition to have those one-on-ones with the team members. Whether I think I had eventually started doing that every 2 weeks, just because you don't want to over meeting everybody, and that's the hard balance actually.
Yeah.
In the all remote world is how many meetings versus
lots of meetings. Yeah.
Making sure I have time to get my work done, because people love to schedule meetings. This could have been an email.
Yeah.
Right. And so that it was important to have that one-on-one time with each team member, making sure that they feel supported, making sure that it feels like I'm walking around the office, but I'm walking around their virtual office, checking in with them, making sure they have all the resources they need, and then I hope that for myself, my leadership is able to do that as well, where I feel like that there's a connection.
Sure.
Because that's the only connection that you get is virtually, for the most part. Now we would. Luckily in my position, we went to a lot of conferences because that's where we were presenting and talking. We were evangelizing a lot. And so that gave us opportunity to see each other in person. And it made it that much more wonderful to like we're finally together, and like we, get to have a beer together, or get to just sit here and talk for a little while. And so I do think in person still, if you can do that once or twice a year, if you're all remote, it helps a lot. But there's the working virtually and working from home all the time also gives you a lot more energy towards wanting to work towards that job, because I can just go all that time I saved not having to drive in and whatnot, I can spend with my friends, my family, or doing things that I love.
Yeah. And so I still feel like remote work is under attack. I think more and more companies, although we've shifted more than we probably would have shifted otherwise thanks to COVID, but I still feel that there's a lot of pushback with respect to remote work. in the corporate space. And that pushback, I feel, is one of those things where it's coming from legacy business models.
Right.
And it's not necessarily it's not based on what we're doing today. It's based on how we did business in the past. And so we had COVID. We went through COVID. We got through 2 years. At the end of it, instead of people coming back and being like, oh, hey, okay, well, there's this new business model here. We're going to adapt to this new model. A lot of companies went and said, hey, you know what? COVID's over, or we think it's over. We're going to slowly start shifting people back, and we're going to have return to work plans, or we're going to have, return. And it's like, it was such a slap in the face, I feel, because it's like when you call it a return to work plan, it's like, wait, what were you doing the last 2 years?
Yeah.
Weren't you working? Right? And so it just feels so crazy that that's what happened, and that's where we're at. And large institutions, banks, government entities, a lot of them, they kind of shifted, and then they shifted back, and employees are rebelling, and it's weird out there with respect to remote work, and it's such a taboo topic. It's when you go out there and you look on LinkedIn, you'll see so many posts about people who are supporting it, so many posts where there's a lot of people out there that are like, if your boss says you have to show up to work and you have to be in the office, and you have to be in the office, right? So how do you feel about that? How do you feel about how it's been kind of turned into this, I don't want to use the word political because it's not political, but it's been turned into this weird thing where it's controversial now.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think it was ever, I don't think that's the right place for it to be, right? It's just really just about, can your business operation support it or not? And, do you want to try to make your employees happier by giving them flexibility? That's really what it's all about. And, there's jobs here at Mute Me that can't be done remotely, right? That's okay. There's jobs that can, and we do both, right? So how do you feel about that?
It's going to continue to be controversial.
Mm-hmm.
I think you kind of alluded to it. There's so many different types of businesses
Mm-hmm.
that everyone's going to have, especially when you're looking at people and how people work. People are going to have different types of approaches of how they feel they work best.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about, a lot of people got the taste of working from home because, the pandemic made everyone had to do that.
Or a lot of people.
A lot of people,
Yeah,
a large majority of people,
Yeah.
and people.
A lot of office workers that didn't normally work remotely.
And the adoption
shifted.
of technology, spiked because they had to learn how to use Zoom. They had to learn how to all these tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at, the controversy that's out there, and you mentioned for Mute Me,
Mm-hmm.
someone's got to package the stuff and ship it out. We can't do that.
Yeah.
I guess we could do that remotely if we're utilizing our garages or something, but we have physical inventory.
And we did for a little while.
We did. That's the basis of a lot of our story and our buildup is working from the garage, just like all the, just like your
just
HP
like
and Apple. But it's hard because you have a lot of traditionalists that's just, they've worked all their life, and
Mm-hmm.
especially when you talk about leadership and management,
Mm-hmm.
they feel more control if they have everyone around. And so you have these different generations that are coming in and now
Mm-hmm.
butting heads with each other, Gen Z and boomers and everyone that's had different types of styles or never
Mm-hmm.
been even, had to been in some type of traditional style that was
Mm-hmm.
in the office. Some people are just coming in and they're working remotely, right out of college,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all they've ever known. And so it's going to be hard there's never going to be the right answer of okay, all remote's it, or being in the office it. There's going to be, what type of business are you running? What is your role at the company?
Mm-hmm.
And once you define that, then there could be more controversy around specifically okay, Tye's on a computer all day. Does he actually need to be in the office if he's on a computer all day? If that's his job.
I say no.
You say no? Yes. And this person is on a computer all day, but they want to be in the office because that's just and that's over that time, you come across a lot of it. I had a good buddy of mine who, in the first maybe year and a half of the pandemic, did not want to be at home that. He was just not he had his office set up.
Yeah.
He had his 3 screens, and to do his job, that's what it was, and that's where he was most comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And he would slip in there, even though he wasn't supposed to because of COVID. And then fast forward, he wants to be at home all the time and working, because then that became his workstation, and he figured it out. And then he
just doesn't like change, right?
Yeah, he just didn't like change,
like
and
change,
so that's
yeah.
a lot of your pushback is people don't want to change. But once he got through that, then he's like, well, more time with my family. I can go pick up my kid real quick. I can help out. You know, there may be, you know, some kind of traditional of like, oh, who picks up the kid? And now there's a balance of like each parent has access to do that quickly, or what's, you know, how can I help my significant other if they're doing something and if I'm doing something. And so that became, you know, now there's the option, or I don't know if they're actually forcing them to go back to the office, but it's like, hey, I want to be at home as much as I can, less in the office, because now we have 2-3 years of, you know, proof of concept that I could do my job here just as well as I can do it there.
Do it there, yeah. And so the other thing is I feel like promotional opportunities when you're hybrid versus all remote versus all in the office, right? So going back to that level playing field, when you're all remote, everyone's in the same boat with respect to promotional opportunities, right? Because everyone's work gets looked at and everyone gets evaluated, and you go through that process. When you have a hybrid environment where some people are remote, some people are not remote, some people are in between, visibility in the office, right? I do think there is a discrepancy with management, especially if it depends on who's setting the culture.
Right.
If you have a hybrid culture at your workplace, it's probably because someone in that organization pushed back against remote work, right?
Yeah.
Someone in a position of power pushed back against more flexibility. And so this was a compromise, right? This was it's like the ultimate compromise. And so I think there is a discrepancy with respect to promotional paths, right? With if you're in the office versus not in the office, especially for hybrid work environments, right?
Yeah, and you know, we'll make a nod to, you know, for our listeners out there, your world of HR, like you've worked, you know, you've been a director at California government, you know, at CalPERS, and that you understand this stuff very, very well in terms of like promotional aspects and that kind of concept. You know, I agree that
I'm not saying it should be that way.
No, I agree that there might be the ability, especially in the hybrid approach, to like, okay, if we're around each other more often, then there's going to be a nod to that way, like, oh, me and Parm are around, and Bovin's never here.
Well,
so
eventually, you start going to lunch together, right? You start building a relationship, and so like relationship building it's just a process, right? And if you have a company that's all remote, I feel like it's easier to make sure everyone has an equal playing field. Once you have a hybrid environment, it's not necessarily going to be an equal playing field, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I agree in that aspect. I think in the world of even if you're all remote or hybrid or on the office, there's always going to be the political BS of like promotional aspects and people coming and going, new people and old, and there's that aspect of like it's supposed to be an equal playing field, and all remote. You know, GitLab did a very good job of defining everything. It's very well known for its handbook, which is like over 1,000 something pages, which was open to anyone that wanted to ever read about any kind of process in GitLab, and the promotional process and everything was very well written out and like documented, and this is how you get to be promoted. So it was there and it's visible, and everyone's on an equal playing field, right? Because we're all working from our house. And we're not hanging out.
Well, it's not like I know there's always going to be political issues, but the political issues may not be systemic in with respect to the where you're working from, right?
Right.
I think when you're working from home and you have someone else who's working in the office, and I'm not saying that it's going to be this. I mean, there's going to be instances where, you know, it's that person's not that great of an employee or whatever. Yeah. But all other things being equal, if one person has more face time with leadership, right, with the executive team, with their boss, with whoever, and the other person doesn't, unless the manager themselves is also remote, do you think that is going to? I'm pretty sure we know the answer to that, but it's probably going to have somewhat of an impact, even though it shouldn't, but it probably will. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the answer. Yeah. It's if I have a best friend that lives here and a best friend that lives across the United States, and I'm hanging out more with my best friend here, I'm gonna.
Your best friend that lives across the United States is no longer your best friend.
No, they're still my best friend, but I'm gonna have more, just more interpersonal moments with that person, and then when I see the best friend from across the United States, it's kind of like a vacation, right, where you get to see that person once or twice, and so everything's be awesome then. But you know, I think that's a bad analogy. I don't like that anymore, because in the world of texting or calling or whatever the hell you want to do, you can establish that, but or keep that. It goes kind of the same thing of a hybrid approach. I'm gonna take that analogy out. Try to be clever there, but I don't like it. But to your point, yes, I think that there's an advantage for hybrid.
Not advantage for hybrid. I'm saying, I know what you mean. Right?
Advantage
to the person who's working,
the person that's
physically in the
same location.
Yeah.
And you know, I think when we look now at not just as an individual, you know, how am I performing or how am I contributing, you know, actually we're going to look at that, which is now, is there more creative or more brainstorming sessions that happen in a hybrid where it's like, hey, let's all come into this room real quick and let's go, you know, talk about this. You know, it becomes, does someone be like, oh, let's call in Bovin from New York just so he can chime in. It's not as ingrained as an all remote where it's like, okay, hey, you want to jump on a call real quick? Okay, yeah. Let's get the team in real quick and just everybody hears a Zoom call, jump on in. Like
so remote might actually have an advantage.
Yeah,
right? because you're accustomed to pulling people in that way.
Right.
And so instead of the water cooler effect that takes place in, you know, there's a digital water cooler, you know, that's taking place with respect to just the ability to pull people in and pull people in from all over the world that may have, you know, varying degrees of, you know, of understanding the issue, and that may be, you know, super important from a diversity standpoint to get a diversity of ideas to tackle whatever problem you're tackling.
Yeah. So I think, and that's where it goes. You could argue too, like, okay, if everybody's in the office, then you avoid that as well from a hybrid. Like, everybody come on in, and we'll talk here. So it is effective in one or the other, but the hybrid way becomes someone's getting left out, and it becomes a little more difficult. Now, if we look a little bit more at, like, okay, let's say in that scenario, like, it's like, hey, let's a quick everyone scrum or get together on this call real quick to talk. If you're distributed across the world, someone is still going to be left out because they may be sleeping, they may be in their evening, and you have to be what's the word I'm looking for? The time you pick out has to be a time that everyone's
works for the most amount of
people. Intentional. There you go. You have to be intentional with that time frame, because I think there was, you know, in kind of there's times when I worked with remote teams, they're like, happy hour, everybody, it's Friday at 3:00. It's like, okay, well, our people in India right now are sleeping. It's like that whole team get together, and so it's like, all right,
meet in your dreams.
Well, then it's like, and then, you know, it was funny because we would have happy hours at like 9 a.m. on a Friday, just to make sure that everybody was included. But then, you know, it's frowned upon. I shouldn't be having a beer in my hand on the Pacific Coast time at 9 a.m., which I don't even think anyone would flinch if that was the case. But you know, it's never going to be perfect. You're never going to have, if you're all in one office, it's going to be everyone that's geographically in that location is in the office. You're still going to have, if you're a big company, you have teams in EMEA or APJ where then they're isolated to their people there. And guess what? You're still going to be communicating on Slack, on Zoom, through email to these different teams. So there's always a little flavor of everything in it.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, from your perspective, you worked in the world of HR, and so, and I'd love to hear what you think, being at a very traditional place where everyone's coming in, and you know, yours was specific to California, right? A lot of the programs, correct me, it's California, so you're isolated, so you guys have your focus.
California state government,
Yeah, so, and then it's in the capital of the state.
Yep.
So with something like that, like, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's actually surprising, because I think the state adopted remote work a little bit better than a lot of private companies did. And I think it was mainly because the leadership at the top kind of made a push for it, towards right at the end of when they could have. So it didn't happen right away, but when the pandemic happened, the state made a conscious choice to say, hey, every state agency, start letting us know how many employees are still showing up, how many employees are deemed essential. Right? Submit your plans, show us, tell us what you got. What are you guys doing with respect to all of this work that needs to be done on a regular basis? Every agency started to kind of submit stuff into up the chain into what we call agencies, and so like state government structured the executive branch of state government is structured in a unique way. You have the governor's office at the top, and then you have the cabinet. And so the governor's cabinet sits below. The cabinet is made up of different individuals. Every individual runs an agency. Each agency has a bunch of departments underneath, and so each one of those departments is then responsible for all kinds of different functions. Everything from, prisons to DMV, right, to unemployment insurance, to the pension system, to, toxic substance control, right, to, alcohol beverage control, right, and everything in between. Water resources, naturally, everything and anything with respect to state government. The agencies took it upon themselves, because due to the direction from the government, to say, hey, we're gonna commit to this all remote during the pandemic, and we're gonna see where this goes. That was not completely surprising because of what the government was saying, especially here in California, to people, right? So if you're a government in some other state and you're telling people, hey, this isn't a big deal, you're not going to go out and then be like, hey, we're going to go commit to 100% remote, right? It doesn't, those two narratives don't align with one another. But in California, because of the fact that the government was saying, hey, don't congregate with people, don't get, don't do all this other stuff. How are they going to expect employees to then continue to do their functions, especially when they didn't need to? So the state, including the agency that I worked at previously, they went 100% remote right off the bat. They could, and they did. The agency that I was at went pretty much 100% remote. They had a very small group of people that were working in like print facilities and things like that, where publications are made and things like that, like print offices, shipping offices, things like that. Same kind of stuff that we do here at Mute Me, where it's hard to make that remote. But even then, those offices spread out and took up more real estate, and they did what they had to do. But they adopted it pretty well. Now I keep in touch with a lot of the folks that still work in the state to kind of see where they're at. And although there's been a lot of pushback from, in the private sector, there's been some pushback with respect to the state is moving a lot slower with rolling people back into the office. And so my previous agency, they still have people working remote. They had people working remote up until 2 months ago. I don't know if that's still the case now, but they still had a vast majority of the workforce working remotely. The agency that I just left, where they had gone to kind of a hybrid model that we talked about earlier, and they had tried to bring people in, and I know they were working on trying to bring people in, but I don't know exactly where they landed so far. But I think with the advent of technology, right, with people doing so well during the pandemic, with operations not being stifled, it kind of proved that remote work was feasible, and I think people they are continuing to now embrace it, whereas before it was something that wasn't embraced at all. And I actually had a remote working job with the state way before the pandemic, a couple years before the pandemic, but it was 1 day a week. And so my wife lived in, we just got married, and she got a job with Intel in Portland. And what I would do is on Thursday nights, I would fly from Sacramento to Portland, wake up Friday, work remotely on Friday from our apartment in Portland, and then spend the weekend up there, and sometimes even Monday morning fly back and get to work by 9 a.m.
See, working remotely is important for love life.
There you go.
It helps that relationship grow stronger. You get, at least in your case, you got more than 2 days, you got 3 days, but why not? Now you can live next to that person. No more long distance relationships. 7 days a week working remotely with the love of your life.
Yeah, and it was crazy because we had our house here in Sacramento, and when she got her job, we weren't expecting to go out there. Like we were like, let's see where this goes. We'll sell our house here. We'll move out there. But I wasn't ready to do all of that right away, right? Because you're still kind of adjusting to this. And so we did it for a year, and then I sold my house. And 3 weeks later, after I sold my house, she got a job here in Sacramento in Folsom, and it was like, oh no. And so then we started looking for a house here, and everything ended up great. But it was one of those things that it was very tricky at that time.
Yeah, and it's I think, and even you bringing this up here about making that adjustment to move toward, this is someone that you're going to marry. Where do we go? They got a job here, I got a job there. Recently I was reading about there's a company that, and I can't remember the name, but the company that had come out and had told employees that they could work remotely, and then a couple months after that, the CEO took it back, and people had sold their houses.
Oh yeah, exactly.
They had moved, grandparents had moved closer to their grandkids.
Yeah.
And then the I feel like it's an insurance company, came out and said, JK, LOL, get back in here to the office.
Yeah, I don't know about the LOL.
I don't think it said that. But it causes a huge uproar at the company because people made life-changing decisions.
Yeah. That's really messed up. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you sour your workforce. They're never
going to trust you again.
They're never going to trust you. The energy goes down a little bit. But where we're at in the world right now, the flexibility of what we had, a year and a half ago, where all right, I'm out of here. If you won't do this, like you don't meet these demands, now you got to kind of sit back and take it.
Yeah.
But how do you do that if you moved away?
Yeah.
You hope that you have an understanding manager or leadership, or you're going to be going trying to find a new job, which is a little difficult right now.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think, and that's where what happened with the pandemic was a lot of technology companies staffed up. Right, so all these technology tools were being adopted faster than ever. New features had to be built.
Yeah, Zoom was like,
new customers had to be got. Right, so marketing teams were sped up and ramped up. Technology teams were also ramped up, right, with respect to trying to build out new features to compete with products that are out in the market, and everyone was trying to capture and lock in. And that's really what everyone, what anyone would have done. Everyone was trying to capture and lock in these customers because they knew that one day the pandemic would end.
Right. But
if you commit to a particular platform, if Zoom took, 60% of the market share, right, Microsoft wasn't going to come in and just take, 25% of it away right away. It was going to take them time, and it was going to take them energy and effort.
And Zoom had a pretty good share before the pandemic because they were. Despite Skype and everything being around for a long time, Zoom came in and made their self-presence, and then
it was a better product.
And they initially had still a large market share in the beginning of the pandemic, but then Microsoft Teams moved quickly. And I'll give shout out to Google Meet, but Teams moved quickly to
Microsoft moved fast
to get up to parity with them.
Yeah, and Microsoft did what they do best, right? So
plus
they release an inferior product. It's not as good. They bundle it.
Bundle.
They bundle it. And then they improve the product over time, right? And so you're on the other end of it, right? You're a customer. You're looking at pricing sheets, and you're like, okay, I'm already paying for Office 365, and this is in the middle of the transition to Office 365 for a lot of companies as well. And so we're already thinking about paying for Office 365. Why not just do this, and we'll get this product, and we don't have to buy this one at all? And that's what they wanted. That's exactly so they executed on that strategy perfectly.
Every Microsoft competitor's story right there.
Yeah. So they're
bundling it.
They bundle it,
giving it for free.
They technically give it for free.
Yeah.
And from a customer's perspective, it's free.
Right.
At that point, and so they are able to just penetrate, get in. It's not the best, and then they make improvements to the product over time. And the difference between Microsoft and Google is Microsoft builds a product, they don't let it go. They will support a product forever.
Yeah.
And a company like Google,
Windows Phone.
Well, Windows Phone's a bad example. But
I'm just kidding.
They got beat in that market. Right?
I had a Windows Phone. I was an early adopter.
Yeah, I had a Windows Phone too for a little bit. Yeah, I had an iPhone. I went from an iPhone to a Windows Phone, and I was like, "What am I doing?"
I think.
But so even before a Windows Phone, because a Windows Phone is like some way later, I had a Pocket PC. So, with the stylus, with the start menu, right? And I was like showing my friends, and I'm like, check this out. There's a media player on here, and you can listen to music. And this is way before, any of this stuff. This is like 2002. But bottom line is Microsoft is they bundle, they do that. They're able to penetrate the market, and that's what they needed to do during that period. And now we're in a stage where all of those resources, everyone's already made their decision, right? Mm-hmm. So we as a company made our decision. We went with Google, even though they may drop a product here and there. We went with Google. That's the company we're sticking with. It's not easy to change all of our file systems and all of the way we do our things, right? Things are starting to get integrated. Any company that picked Microsoft, same thing. Right. They're committing to features. They're turning things on. They're turning things off. Right. They're like, the recognition programs are tied into their stuff now, and so like you end up committing to one platform, and then you start building on that platform, and that's what they wanted, and that's what they staffed up for. And now that all that stuff is done, now they're shedding people, and because all the hard work of trying to capture the pie is done, now they're in maintenance mode where they're really just about milking the cow. Right. It's like, okay, we got all these customers locked in, we'll won't raise prices for 2 years or 3 years, but watch, we'll raise the price $2 in 2 years, right? Yep. And then 2 years after that we'll raise the price $3 now, and it's like they're at the point of extracting value from customers now. Right. Yeah,
makes sense. Walmart approach.
Yeah, it's the everyone approach.
Everyone approach. True.
Any large company approach.
True. So, what's your take on how is the world of business going to just continue with these three choices that they have? Mm-hmm. Is it going to shift more towards one or the other, or is it kind of this stagnant state where companies are just trying to figure it out? They're going back to see what it's like, or is there going to be a flip-flopping? What's happening?
So actually, I don't know. So this is going to be a tangent, but bear with me here. Because of the fact that interest rates went up, and a lot of commercial property just got more expensive. So the way commercial loans work, it's not the same as residential loans. A lot of times you don't lock in your interest rate, right? So your interest rate is variable. You leave it variable. You pay down property as you go, and your interest rate fluctuates with the market rate. Because of that, a lot of companies that were kind of making the argument like, we want everyone to come back in, I feel like especially mid-sized companies, they may be kind of thinking, hey, this just got a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Our real estate just got a lot more expensive. What if we just let people work from home and we don't have to hold these office buildings anymore? And so I have no idea where this is going to go long term. I think ultimately, long term, I do think remote work and flexibility is going to win out. It's what people want. The technology continues to get better and better every day. We talk about, like in our business, we talk about the fidelity of conversations online. The fidelity of conversations online has just improved dramatically, even over the last 5 years. And so you look at webcams today, way better than before. You look at microphones today, way better than before. You look at any type of these products, right, that support this infrastructure, the internet connections, the backbones that carry all this information better than before, the latency better than before. And so the technology is going to continue to improve. It's only going to get better and better and better. It's relentless, right? The business models that are now supported based on that technology are also going to continue to improve. So before, whereas like we talk about customer service, for example, before all the service folks were in a big giant call center, right? They're in a call center. They're working from one place. Now they're working overseas.
Yeah.
In the future, you're going to have probably AI play a role in this. You're going to have an AI layer, and you're going to have customer support folks that are supporting AI, and they can work from anywhere. Right?
Yeah. It's like, and it's going to be reduced cost too if you work from anywhere. Like instead of gathering everybody and the Silicon Valley or New York or LA and more expensive spots, now we can hire somebody in Arkansas or somewhere else that's going to be maybe a little bit less expensive.
And it's not just that. So what you're going to go for is you're going to go for quality over quantity. So right now we're in the quantity stage because we hire a lot of people all over the world that are answering these questions to be able to help customers quickly. In the future, I think we're going to go to a quality stage where you're going to want high quality people that handle escalations that the AI couldn't handle. And so the work is just going to change. It's not going to be the same type of work that we're doing now. Instead of answering questions from customers directly, the AI, the middle layer of AI, might be handling 95% of all questions, and anything that the AI can't answer, or it gets stuck on, or it needs additional help or guidance, or it's something that you want a human to intervene, like sending out free product. That's where the elevated customer support comes in. It's not done at that first layer, and then that person doesn't have to be in a call center in India. They don't have to be in a call center here in the United States. They can work from home. Yeah. And that's not the only jobs, right? So all these other types of jobs, HR jobs, accounting jobs, all these types of jobs, as these tools continue to be built out, it's only going to get easier and easier for them to be able to work remotely from a job perspective, from a work perspective.
And AI can work remotely.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. They don't have to be in an office. It doesn't have to be in an office. AI doesn't. I think you're spot on there in terms of the world as we see it's changing quickly, especially with AI. Pandemic into a little bit of a crypto and what do you call it? The world, not the meta world, but the metaverse and crypto
got hot
and metaverse
for a little
got
bit.
hot for a minute, and then now AI is taking over, and it's making a huge change to even what was remote work.
Yeah.
3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, 1 year ago, and now it's significantly shifting that.
So we had a friend. So this is a mute me story, but we had a friend who was doing our customer service, right?
Right.
So you know the story already, right? So we had a friend that was doing customer service. She would log in remotely from anywhere and handle our customer service questions. Then we implemented AI. Right? And she already had another job that, so it's not like she lost her job or her livelihood. But then we implemented AI. Now, the AI handles 90% of all incoming questions.
And we take care of escalations.
And we take care of escalations here and there.
Yeah.
Which we did anyways when she wasn't able to answer the questions, right?
Right.
So
just the other day, AI we have a lot of enterprise orders that come, or even smaller, large bulk orders.
Yeah.
And our AI response says this is 100% generated AI response. Just we're transparent in terms of that to our customers. And the person responded back to it with their order. And it caught me off guard because I thought that you had might have spoken to that person, because normally there's a human intervention in between.
Yeah.
But they just placed an order with the AI responding to them. And then I just came in and created the invoice, and which we could probably automate it too.
Yeah.
And sent it to them. And it caught me off guard because I was used to having some type of
customer interaction.
But this person, it didn't even flinch. They just ordered, even though they knew it was an AI response.
Yeah. Which is absolutely incredible.
It's great in terms of time reduction and time spent for us, but still different.
Yeah. But going back to remote work in that respect, right? So she was working remote. She's no longer working remote. And now there's AI. And now we're a small company, and we can, so therefore the escalations were being handled by us. But if we were a large company, right, the escalations would now be handled by specialists, right?
Right.
Those escalations that are handled by specialists, those specialists don't necessarily need to be in a giant call center anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what's happening. It's shifting, and the tools are going to only get better. The fidelity of conversations is only going to get better. All this stuff is going to continue to drive innovation, and it's going to continue to push people towards remote work. It's going to happen. It might take a little bit longer. And COVID, although accelerated everything, there's also, it's like a pendulum, right? It swings back and forth, but every single time it gets a little bit closer to being, more remote and more free.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like the way that it's going that way.
Yeah.
Again, I could say I'm biased, but I don't think it's biased because I've experienced. I know you're biased. I experienced both. I was down in Silicon Valley. I was driving, my 30-minute commute that was a 2-mile drive from my house to my work, which, 30 minutes a day, just 3 stoplights away from my workplace, and shifted that into working for GitLab, and then we started our company in the middle of COVID, being all remote. And I think even as our team, like we didn't see each other.
We didn't see each other for like 4 months.
3
months?
Was that? I mean, did we start the company and never meet for 4 months?
Yeah, we met for the first time. I was dropping off 3 months. I was dropping off prototypes with
in
you.
the parking lot by Dutch Brothers.
Yeah, but that's
that was the first time I met you.
That's the first time we met.
Yeah, and you.
Yeah, me and you met where I dropped off prototypes.
Like a drug deal. Just handing
it was
off
weird.
In the middle of COVID.
It was weird. It was a little weird because I gave you like this, like nondescript package.
Yep.
Yeah, you didn't give me money, so but yeah,
That is true.
But still, it's a little sketchy.
I gave you marketing.
You gave me marketing. Yeah, you gave me some materials. You gave me like a flash drive or something.
Yeah, something like that.
and then but the whole team, when we think about the whole team or the core team at that time, we met outside your house when I was driving back.
That's right.
To go to my parents' house, and it was like 4 months later.
Yeah.
It was like
remember we took a picture and everything.
We took a picture, right? That was the first time. That was like
kids.
That was in like December or January.
Yeah.
So we started in September. It was probably January. I want to say early January.
Was it really?
I want to say it was like mid Kickstarter campaign.
So working all remote, never meeting each other, and by that time we had raised $350,000.
Yeah,
in that time frame.
No, we had about 150.
That's right. The next 150
next
came after that,
Yeah,
but it was still impressive for never seeing each other ever in person.
Well, we started a company without ever meeting each other in person.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, well, at least
that's like
your family and our family, because we had met Scott and Sam prior.
Yeah.
Business wise, we never met
collectively.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
cool. Well, there's so much more to talk about with remote work, and I would love. I mean, this is something that I'd love to just hear other people's opinions. I'd like to see someone that's like a devout in-office person and
we'll
a devout all-remote, and then someone that's a champion for hybrid. Like, this is how it can work, but we'd love to hear thoughts and comments, or even have that conversation with somebody just to give different perspectives. But great talking today.
Yeah, nice chatting with you, Ty.
Catch you on the next